mynews.studio.
Hunger in Gaza is finally easing. For the first time in years, aid is meeting everyone's needs. But the question is, will this actually last?
Today is January 19th, 2026. This is the first time since October 2023 that humanitarian aid has actually covered all the minimum nutritional requirements for Gaza's 2.3 million people. That's from a new United Nations report. For nearly 2 years, food deliveries just weren't enough, even half of what was needed some months. Why did it take so long for aid to catch up?
Most of it came down to ongoing conflict and access restrictions. Since late 2023, fighting between Israel and Hamas made it nearly impossible for supplies to get in. Local food production basically stopped, so people had to rely almost completely on aid. By the end of 2025, about 77% of Gaza's population, so around 1.6 million people, were facing acute food insecurity. That included more than 100,000 children and nearly 37,000 pregnant or breastfeeding women at risk of malnutrition. Some areas even reached what's officially considered famine, according to the IPC Phase 5 classification.
The big turning point, though, was after the ceasefire on October 10, 2025. In just 3 months, over 165,000 metric tons of aid arrived in Gaza. That's a major increase. The main entry points were Kerem Shalom, Kerem Abu Salam, and Zikim. But was it just about bringing in more aid, or was there something else that made the difference?
It wasn't just the volume. The ceasefire allowed repairs to roads, clearing of rubble, and the reopening of distribution points. Humanitarian groups were able to deliver 1.3 million food packages and 1.5 million hot meals. They also increased support for bakeries. By January 2026, 30 bakeries were producing 170,000 bread bundles every day. 1/3 of those went free to more than 400 shelters. Markets were restocked too, not just with food, but also hygiene kits and nutrition supplies.
That's a real shift. But can we say the crisis is actually over?
No area in Gaza is classified as famine anymore, based on the latest IPC update. Gaza Governorate, which had been in famine, has improved. Still, the situation's fragile. Violence hasn't ended. There were airstrikes and clashes in early January that killed 5 and injured 11. And winter storms have destroyed shelters, setting back road repairs. There are fuel shortages that limit what aid groups can do. Only 40% of health facilities are operating right now.
So even though there's enough food for now, things could still go backward. What are the main risks to holding on to this progress?
Several risks stand out. If fighting picks up again, border crossings could close. Storms and damaged infrastructure might block supplies. Import restrictions on agriculture and medical items are still in place. And there's a funding gap. The UN says another $347.5 million is needed to keep aid flowing.
So these gains are pretty fragile. When aid was blocked in late 2024, 83% of needed food supplies couldn't get in. That forced families to survive on just one meal every other day. Even with more aid now, 79% of households still can't afford a diet rich in nutrients. Disease risk is up too, especially in crowded camps.
Right. And it's not just about food. Access to water, healthcare, and sanitation is still limited. Aid groups are trucking in more than 21,000 cubic meters of water a day and giving out winter kits. But the overall needs are huge.
Is there any indication that what's happening in Gaza could serve as a model for responding to hunger in other regions?
Yes. The UN and aid groups see this as proof that making access possible can change outcomes. The ceasefire made it possible to scale up aid and push back famine. That's a lesson for other places, like West and Central Africa, where 55 million people are at risk, or Venezuela, where 1/4 of the population needs aid. The key is open access and steady funding.
So, it's both hopeful and a warning. Without continued access and funding, progress could vanish quickly. Has there been any movement by the international community to help?
There are steps being taken to increase funding and keep up the pressure for access, but nothing is guaranteed. Aid leaders warn that unless commercial imports and local food production recover, Gaza will stay vulnerable.
So, in summary, Gaza has reached a turning point, with aid finally meeting everyone's nutritional needs. But conflict, weather, and funding shortfalls could undo that progress. The situation is still unfolding, and what happens now could influence how aid is delivered worldwide.
That brings us back to our opening question. Can this fragile progress continue? Only with time and ongoing cooperation will we know.
Thanks for joining us as we looked at the details behind Gaza's humanitarian aid progress.
Thank you for listening. This episode was brought to you by mynews.studio. Try it now, free of charge.